Health tech innovations in the real world.
All right, good afternoon everyone. My name is Ostermeier. I'm the CEO and founder of Implandata. And I fear that this will not be a feel-good talk, because I'm going to talk about health tech innovation in the real world. So maybe before I start, a brief background about myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur in medical devices for the last 20 years. I started already 3 startup companies, one in neurosurgery, which was sold to Johnson & Johnson. Another one, which was in emergency care, was a portable product to detect traumatic brain injuries outside of the hospital. Also, that company was sold to a large US company. I also started a cardiovascular company, and now I'm running a company which is improving the management of glaucoma patients. So I got a lot of experience in the last 20 years. I have seen many startup companies in the past. Most of them failed. I have communications with a lot of investors. I hate to say, but most of the investors also don't have any clue. So they are only interested in getting their carry-ons, but they really don't care about their startup companies. So what's the failure rate of startups? I think it's pretty shocking. The total failure rate is 90%. So it means of all the startup companies here in the room, the certainty that one will be successful will be only 10%. Even more worse, 98% of the digital health startup fails. So why is that? I'll come back to that in a little bit. Only 90% of the, so I think that makes sense, because in the beginning, there's seed funding, so 90% of the startups really make it through year 1. But 70% fail within 5 years. Again, I think these are really pretty shocking numbers. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, and I'll show that in a little bit, but I think you have to face reality. So why do startups fail? Primarily because the technology or the solution provided does not really address the market. So there is a lack of product and market fit. And there's also marketing problems, means that an innovation is not getting into the market. 18% is team problems. So that there is not the right team working in the startup company, missing experiences, and there's of course also finance problems. But the interesting thing is tech, legal, operations, it's a minor problems. So that says, that you always can get the technology to a certain stage. But that's not the problem. The problem really is get to a solution which is accepted by the market, which is needed in the market. Another interesting information. So in order to get a medical device approved in the US, if it's in 510K, you can expect an average cost of 31 million. And most of that is related to FDA expenses. Talking about a PMA, it takes an average 94 million. And also here, most of the money goes into FDA-related activities. I think for CE marking, the numbers are not as high, but I think it's fair to say that also CE marking will cost you, depending on if it's class 1, class 2, or class 3, but you can compare a class 3 with a PMA, and you can compare a class 2 with a 510K, that also in the US and Europe, for the CE marking, you will spend at least 1/3 of these costs, at least. I think you have to be very realistic that you have a long way to go and that you need sufficient funding for your project. Time to market, in average 3 to 7 years, also depends if it's a 510K or if it's a PMA. I think Europe, it's easier. I think that's the advantage of CE marking, that in Europe you can get to market earlier. But then you have to make sure you know that there is a market. CE market does not mean that you will sell products, not at all. It tells that you met some minimum requirements for your product, but that does not mean that you have a market. So I think the questions every founder should ask himself are, am I working only on a cool idea, or is there a real problem? Many times, young startup founders, they have a cool idea, but they don't know the market. They think, okay, they have high dreams and they are very enthusiastic about it, but I think that's the wrong approach. You always have to think, okay, is there a problem? And not, I got a cool technology, so let's find what I can do with that. Another important thing is, especially for medical devices, you have to have all stakeholders on board. You have to have the doctors, you have to have the patients, you have to have the hospitals, you have to have the payers. So if one of them is missing, you can have the best solution, but if patients don't like it, it doesn't work. You can have a solution which is highly demanded by the patient, but the eye doctors don't like to apply it because they cannot make money, no chance. If you have a great solution which is accepted by the patients, which is accepted by the doctors, but the payers don't like it because their budget is blown up, no chance. So as I said, you have to have all stakeholders on board. From the very beginning, before you start something, make sure that you got all your stakeholders on board. You also have to ask yourself, do I have the right team? Running a startup is not a one-man show. Sometimes I've seen startup companies, they named the company after themselves, If you see a company, which is named to the founder, go away, because that's already kind of disturbing. And you also have to think, what is the best market access? How can I get really into the market? I think that's also something you have, before you start something, you have to really kind of visualize yourself, okay, I got a solution, but how am I able to get this into the market? And what's the reimbursement situation? For example, we have, I think in Europe, it's relatively still, also under the MDR, relatively easy to get CE marking, but the market access situation in Europe is just terrible. Then you have other markets, like US, where you have pretty high hurdles with the FDA, but overall, the market access is more positive. So I think you have to, from the very beginning, think about, okay, what's my best strategy in order to obtain reimbursements? And of course, a constant question, how I'm going to fund this? I think there is different options. There is not only venture capital, there is other things where you can get funding, but please make sure that you have sufficient funding. I've seen many startup companies dying because their funding was just too tight, and they always kind of have been in constant mode of fundraising. And that really can drag a company out, and also a team out, I've seen companies, they had high prospects and really great technology, great team, but they have been really kind of, they looked for the best valuation. Valuation is not everything, You have to have the right amount of money. Having sufficient money is more important than a very good valuation, because valuation doesn't buy you anything. Money is what buys you stuff and progress. So please don't be too greedy, because you want to have the right amount of funds. Some practical tips. As said, involve your stakeholders from the very beginning. That's what I always did with my companies. Before I started something, before I started this company, Implandata, I talked to a lot of ophthalmologists. I talked to payers. I talked to patient organizations. I just wanted to figure out, okay, is there a real problem? And how are the different stakeholders seeing a solution which can be provided maybe in 5 or 10 years? You always have to think, okay, how does my solution fit into the existing ecosystem? And I think that's a problem with all the digital health solutions. I think these are fantastic ideas, AI, big data, all the things. But how does that really fit? And who is paying for that? Define your business model from the very beginning, and also define how am I getting reimbursement? And what's going to be reimbursed? Is it a product? Is it services? Whatsoever? But you have to have a really clear picture. What's my reimbursement? And also identify the most attractive markets for your company. Because each market, we've seen time to market, cost to get to market, and also the return. I think you have to really be clear about where you want to go. I've seen many companies, especially German companies, because Germans love engineering. So engineer, and they always want to get the perfect solution before they really do some validation. And so they spend a lot of time and money, and I think it's better to have a first prototype, even if it's not fully functional yet, but get it validated, because if you find out early on it's not working, for any reason, then you can save a lot of investors' money and a lot of your time. So do validation as soon as possible. I hate to say, but do a quick and dirty prototype and do a very careful validation. And it's better to find out within 1 year, oh, it's just not going to work, instead of spending 5 years, a lot of money, a lot of time, and then realize, we have been on the wrong train here. Right competences, add external people, talk to potential buyers of your company, get involved with advisors. I think not really pay advisors asking you for a lot of money, so advisors who are out of the industry, who love to help. I think these kind of people, kind of mentorships are very important. Stay away from advisors asking for a daily rate of $3,000. They just want to make money with you. As said, funding, very important. And from the very beginning, think about how you are going to exit the company. I think that's also makes a difference, If you want to run your company forever, then don't go to venture capitalists, because venture capitalists want to sell your company at a point. If you want to do an exit pretty fast, then position your company accordingly. I think it would not make a lot of sense to build up huge marketing and sales infrastructure, because a potential acquirer of the company will have anyhow. So I do think do a very focused first market launch, generate some first traction in the market, and then to scale up a company like Johnson & Johnson, Medtronic, or whatsoever. They are eager to do that for you. You don't have to do that. Here is a typical startup curve. I think that's kind of very common. So initially, there is a lot of enthusiasm. But then, as I said, you're faced with reality, with all kinds of problems. Running a startup is not solving one big problem. It's about solving tiny, small problems every day. And I think you have to really go through sometimes to a death valley. And so once you got some progress, once you have first clinical data, once you're closer to CE marking, once you also see, that you got a lot of backing endorsement from opinion leaders, I think then you will be excited. But don't expect, that running a startup company will be fun all the time. Not at all. I think you have to have a lot of discipline to really get going. You have to have the right team, and you have to have the right investors, because, also investors need to understand it's not always positive. You have setbacks, you have problems to solve, and if you have an investor, and I've seen investors, they got really nervous right away if there's a problem. It's better to tell an investor there is a problem, because it's better for them to deal with that problem instead of making a nice picture and then sooner or later they'll find out anyhow, and then you lose your credibility. All right, I think whoever runs a startup here is not disencouraged. I think it's really fun overall, but I think you have to be real and have to be face the reality here. All right, thank you very much.